A very good evening to everyone. Today we have amongst us Mr. Ashish Kumar Chauhan. Ashish sir is the MD and CEO of BSE. BSE is Asia's oldest stock exchange. It is also the world's fastest exchange with 6 microseconds response time. It is the world's largest exchange with 5,000 plus listed companies and India's first universal exchange to offer trading across all asset classes. Ashish sir is credited with reviving BSE and completing its IPO, which has oversubscribed more than 51 times. He was instrumental in setting up India's first international exchange, India International Exchange, which was inaugurated by India's Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi in January 2017. Prior to joining BSE, from 2000 to 2009, Ashish sir worked at Reliance Industries, which is India's largest conglomerate as president and group CIO. He was the head of corporate communications and CEO of cricket team Mumbai Indians in its formative years. From 1993 to 2000, he set up India's National Stock Exchange, which is known as NSE, primarily on technology, screen-based trading system, satellite communications network, equities and derivatives business, and Nifty Index amongst his many responsibilities. He is considered the father of modern financial derivatives in India due to his work at NSE. He received several Indian and international awards, including Distinguished Alumnus Award from both his alma mater, IIT Bombay and IIM Kolkata. This is a rare achievement. He has also been awarded Digital Icon of the Year by Indian Express Group. He has ranked among the top CEOs in financial markets by Asian Banker. He was amongst top 50 CIOs in the world by Information Week US. He is a member of several committees of government, regulators, and international associations. He is a member on the board of directors at IIM Raipur and NIFM Faridabad and served as the chairman of NIT Manipur. He is a distinguished visiting faculty at Ryerson University in Toronto and honorary professor at Nottingham University Business School. He co-authored a book on the history of BSc titled The Temple of Wealth Creation. So, without any more delay, I would like to call upon Ashish sir to start the session.
Thank you, Mansi. Thank you, friends, for joining today. Uh, in a way, this is a very interesting sort of activity that all of you are gathering to do. That is to do a game on or to participate in a game on stock markets. So, in some ways, what you end up playing as game, and there are many games that go on in life. This is one of them. And if you don't understand how the actually stock markets work, why do they work, what are they set up for, we end up going into wrong direction. And so, I mean, I have been an engineer. I am also from IIT Bombay, and so I know how easy it is to get directed into wrong sort of direction. And so it's important for all of you who are keenly interested in stock markets. That's why you are participating in this tournament. And so it's a pleasure and honor to be in front of you today, starting this event, kickstarting this event. So for me, stock market means different things to different people. And it's like a large elephant and blind man describing that elephant. Everyone will come out with different opinions, and all of them are right, and in some ways, all of them are wrong. So, if you understand the basics of why these things happen, then it will be easier for you to grasp, and some of the areas that are covered in your game may be important with that, but that may not be the only thing that happens in stock markets, or that may be just the tip of the iceberg. Many times I explain that the users of stock markets, including the programmers and others, they are like basically drivers of a car. Most drivers don't know how the car is made. Most drivers don't even know how the engines work, and so on and so forth, or how the suspension works, how the exhaust works, how the air conditioning works. And still, if they just know how to work on steering wheel, accelerator, and the clutch, broadly, the car, they would be able to move the car. Similarly, most of the players or most of the participants in the markets, usually even the people who have worked in it for 50 years, 60 years also wouldn't know what that beast is all about. So I would try to explain the beast from the experiences I had. Almost my entire career of around 30 years have gone in this areas of setting up markets, running them, regulating them, sort of creating automation for the Indian markets, creating newer instruments, and so on and so forth. So we'll start with the concept of what is market. Every commodity has a market. So if you have a vegetable market, you know how it works. If you have a fish market, how it works, right? So there are buyers and sellers, and they negotiate sometimes in real time, sometimes off real time. So you go to shop to buy toothpaste. The prices are defined, the MRP, right? So somebody else decides the price. You are just able to decide whether you want to buy that toothpaste or not in a shop. But if you are in a vegetable market, you do a little bit of bargaining. If you are in fish market, you do a little bit of bargaining and things like that, right? So, but all of them have some sellers, some buyers. Sometimes prices are fixed. Sometimes prices are not fixed. And how the prices are determined is also interesting. But that is one portion of the market. The stock markets also behave very similarly on a superficial basis, on an immediate basis. So when you want to buy or sell, you can say, I want to buy at such and such price, or I want to sell at such and such price, so much quantity, and other people are able to see. And then if they want to buy from you or sell to you, they can also place orders against that, and they may be able to trade against you. And so once the trading happens, you basically have a binding contract or an agreement. So any trade or any transaction in the world, even social transactions are like that, not only commercial transactions like fish or vegetable or buying fridge or air condition or anything, but or mobile phone for that matter. But even social contracts or social agreements, social transactions also go through similar process. The first part in which you do things to agree to exchange is called agreement to exchange or trade in our business. You can divide into even more parts, but the agreement to exchange or trade is an essential part based on which the future activities can happen. So, for example, you go to the shopkeeper and you say, I want to buy this toothpaste and this toothbrush. And the shopkeeper will figure out that the toothpaste costs you 15 rupees and toothbrush costs you 10 rupees. So it's like 25 rupees you have to give him, and he'll give you toothpaste and toothbrush. So you give him this toothpaste, you give him 25 rupees and he gives you a toothpaste and toothbrush. So that's a full complete trade that has happened. But trade, I divide into three parts. One is the agreement to exchange. When you say, I want to buy this too, and then he decides the obligations. You have to give him 25 rupees, he'll give you this toothpaste and toothbrush. So that deciding on obligations, it's called clearing. And then when you give him 25 rupees, he gives you the toothpaste and toothbrush, then it is called settlement. So every transaction in the world is, I divide into three parts for easy to understand purposes: trade, clearing, and settlement. Agreement to exchange, decide on the obligations, and exchange of goods and services against money or other goods and services if it's a barter system, right? So you all know what is barter. That is, you don't pay money, but instead of toothpaste and toothbrush, when he gives you, you can give him 1 kilo of rice, which you had in your farm, and so that is also a kind of a transaction. But effectively, every transaction is divided into three parts: trade, clearing, settlement. agreement to exchange, decide on obligations, and settlement of goods and services against money or other goods and services, right? So broadly, this is how it works. And in a way, what is the risk that is arising in this kind of transaction, where you buy toothpaste and toothbrush, right? Broadly speaking, there is no risk because at the time you are agreeing to exchange, you are also settling. So agreement time, deciding on obligations time, and settlement time, all are almost one after another within few seconds. There are many transactions in the world which actually happen where the transaction happens now, agreement to exchange happens now, but settlement happens after few days, few weeks, few months. So whenever you trade and settle at the same time, those kind of transactions are called spot transactions or cash transactions. Immediate cash, spot. In Hindi, we call it rokde ka sauda. I mean, you pay the money and take it. Whereas the transactions where you trade now for settlement after some time, like you tell your shopkeeper that toothpaste and toothbrush you deliver to my house after 7 p.m. or tomorrow at 7 p.m., then it's not the same as the earlier transaction, and there is a more risk because now the shopkeeper may not come to deliver, or you may not give him 25 rupees, and so on and so forth, right? So there are the transactions which settle in sometime in future, not immediately. They are basically not spot transactions. They are future transactions or forward transactions. So they are called Vaide ka sauda, promised things, you know. So these are basic parts of life. When you go through this tournament, you will understand that what you do on the screen at the time of order entry is basically you're showing your willingness. And then when the order matches, that is the time you have agreement to exchange happening or trade happening. And settlement may happen after 1 hour, 2 hour, 5 hours. And in between, a lot of other processes may happen, like deciding on obligations and other things. So I just want you to be aware that what you are doing now is essential part of life. Every day, every moment, we do this. Like, for example, I had a trade with the organizers of this event that I'm going to speak today at 6 p.m. But the trade happened a few weeks back. And now the settlement is happening where I'm supposed to speak, right? So every transactions you can actually convert into trade, clearing, and settlement. And that's how things happen, right? Sometimes in your college, you have a trade that you will basically your teacher will speak and you will go and attend. And many times you don't attend, right? So he has basically delivered his side, but you are not delivering your side, and so on and so forth. So that's broadly how any market would function. But the markets for stocks or market for share are very different because they allow you to invest into something which produces something else. So that also you need to understand how this shares work. Why the shares are different, essentially different from a refrigerator or an onion or a potato. Is because in potato you buy that, or toothpaste you buy that, you start using, and that's over. There is nothing remaining after that. But in share market, in stock market, you buy shares which are supposed to give you the returns, the dividends, the profit share after several years for a very long period of time. And that's why they are called capital market. Why they are called capital markets also has a history. You have heard of a per capita income, GDP per capita for a nation. That is the income for per person, per head. Capita means head. Have you heard of capital punishment? Capital punishment means you remove the head from the body. And that's how, again, everything comes out of that concept of capita. Capita means the head. So in the olden times, people who used to have more goats and more cows and more buffaloes used to be very rich people, right? And why they were rich? Because those cows will produce milk for a very long period, and then also they will produce a lot of other cows and buffaloes and milk, goats and all. So that's how those were called assets or capital. People who had more capital were more wealthy because they didn't have to work. Those cows and buffaloes were producing milk for them, and so on and so forth, right? So basically, that's why when you invest in something, which produces something else, at least there is a promise to produce something else later on, then that is called capital markets. I'll just give you a perspective on the cryptocurrencies, because many times we think we are technologists and engineers. So cryptocurrencies are not part of the capital because they don't produce anything else. There is nothing to promise even, right? So that's why I don't consider them as part of the capital market. Even gold, I don't consider it as a part of the, because gold doesn't produce new gold. A buffalo produces new buffalo, right? And also milk. A company produces profits. At least there is a potential. It might also create losses, but there is a potential that it will create profits and so on and so on. That's where basically capital markets differ from cryptocurrencies. Many times people make you think that both are the same. They are not the same. Now, the capital markets, when they are supposed to produce something else, how do this happen? A company is formed. What is a company? Because unless we understand how these things happen, we will not be able to appreciate. And in a probably 40-50 minutes, it won't be easy for me to give you this ideas in detail. But a company is a legal entity. It's not a physical entity. So four of us who are studying in any engineering college, we get together and say, we'll start a business. And we start a company. So we go to a government agency called Registrar of Companies and register our company. Somebody else will help us. We don't even know how it will happen, but we go to the chartered accountant or a company secretary, and that person will help us to register our company, which will have some sort of a defined business that we want to do it in the IT sector. We want to create program and sell it to people, or we want to prepare programs as the customers want. And so we create that company. We put in 10 lakh rupees into that company. We say that we'll get this 10 lakh rupees from somewhere. So that is the authorized capital which comes out of the company. And then out of which we put in some, each of us put in 25,000 each. So we have 1 lakh rupees, which we have put in the company. Against that, we get share of profit. If four of us are there and we are all putting 25,000 rupees each and also doing the same hard work, all of us are going to work the same way, then all of us have equal share of 25% in the profits. And that's how this basically, the stock market, the company is formed and all the owners have certain shares. After a few days, you say that my 25%, I want to divide amongst my brothers. I have 4 brothers, so I have 5 of us together, we'll have 5% each. And so you pass on your share into that company's profit to 5, totally 5 people, 5% each, which you had. As 25% now becomes 5% each. And that's how, and slowly, if the company starts making profit and it becomes basically unicorn, as it is called now, $1 billion valuation company, then your brothers will also become very rich. And that's the concept of basically something which produces something else. You put in 25,000 rupees, but it may become worth 250 crore rupees or say 3,000 crore rupees, or your 25,000 rupees may go also, right? So that's basically the framework on which you create share of profit. And that's how the companies are formed. They are legal entities. They are not physical entities. A cow is a physical entity. A cat is a physical entity. A human is a physical entity. You can touch them. You can feel them. They do exist. They live, right? They move around. Even trees are physical. But the company is a conceptual entity. And the society has created laws and acts. And it makes everyone behave the way the laws are saying. And that's why the company is very different from its people who own it. Many times we have an idea that somebody is the MD, like I am the MD of the Bombay Stock Exchange. So I and company are the same. I and BSE are the same. We are not. I am only a person who is running. I am only an agent of the company. It's like a driver of a car. I am not the car. Car is different. I may own the car or partially own the car. Similarly, 4 of you who have put in 25,000 rupees each may be owners of the company, but you are not the company, right? And as I said, you can pass it on to your brothers. They can pass it on to their friends and so on and so forth later on. And so that's how more and more people participate. Now, suppose you need more money to run your business. And so you come to the BSE saying, I want to list my company. Listing is again another process by which you tell your friends, relatives, people who know you, people who don't know you, saying, I need so much funds. I need, say, 1 crore rupees. And to run the company. And if it makes profits, of course, I'll give you the shares in that proportion. And people who want to buy those shares can come and buy. So we run a process called IPO, or initial public offering. And people who know you or don't know you, but if they have some trust in your capabilities to generate profits in future, they may all put in. So if you want 1 crore rupees and 100 people put in 1 lakh each, you will get 1 crore rupees, right? And so you have now 1 crore rupees from the others people and 1 lakh rupees from 4 of you. But it is possible that you have kept that 1 crore rupees you have collected from people at 100 times the prices. So you have 1 lakh rupees put in yours, and new 1 lakh rupees worth shares are issued. So you are still owning 50%. People have given you 1 crore rupees. You have only given 1 lakh rupees, but still they will give 50%. So you are like 50-50. 50% is with 4 participants, and their share as in profit has now gone to 12.5% each. Whereas the newcomers, all of them have got basically the 50% divided by 100 people, and that's how 0.5% goes to everyone. That's how the IPO comes in. They collect the money, and now you have 1 crore and 1 lakh rupees available to work on your company. And the share prices, somebody will try to buy, somebody will try to sell, and if their orders get matched, then there will be a trade, and later on, the person who has sold has to deliver the shares. Person who has bought has to give the money to their respective brokers, and that's how this transaction happens. So what I explained to you till now is basically the transaction processing part of it, how the company gets formed, and how the share of profit gets divided amongst, and how the IPO happens. Then also we discussed trade clearing settlement, and that's broadly what you are going to do in case the tournament also is going to have IPOs in their framework. But tournament certainly will have trading clearing settlement portion of it, where you have to go to the bank, you have to have depository for keeping your shares in your name, you keep money in the bank, you keep shares in the depository, in basically in the same bits and bytes. No, there is no physical share, but earlier there used to be physical share. So that's broadly how this is going to happen. I also talked to you about the spot trade and forward trade, right? So these are basic concepts of the stock markets. It is, I think, hugely technical. In a very short time, I've tried to explain to you. But someday, probably even today, tomorrow, when you start playing this game, you will start understanding what I meant. Some of you might have already read up since you are participating, so you might be able to kind of connect to this. Now, how did this stock markets business start? Which is very interesting. India had a role to play. All of you know the numerals, the decimals, decimal system of numerals was invented in India, and it was then taken by Arabs to West, Europe, and that's why in West it is called the Arabic numerals, and in Arabia it's called Hindu numerals. So now finally, after so many years, people figured that Arabs did not invent it, Indians did, and that's why it's called Hindu-Arabic numerals broadly, unless the guys are really in the living, say, 100 years old history. And so numerals, decimal systems had a very large role to play in increasing the business, because if you try to sort of calculate with Roman numerals, you will realize how difficult it is. And in childhood, you might have figured that Roman numerals are really pathetic in terms of doing any operation like arithmetic or algebra or anything, right? And you might have also heard where algorithm concept came from. There was a guy called Al-Khwarizmi. He wrote a book on algebra, which had come from India. And that's why he called it Al-Jibr Al-Muqawla, or some longish name. But Al-Jibr stuck in the Western countries. That's why it's called Algebra. And Al-Khwarizmi was the author. That's why the programming which you do is called algorithm, but it's basically the name of Al-Khwarizmi, which anyway comes to you in a different way. And so all these things, the modern world got possible literally because of the Hindu numeral systems, which were invented somewhere in India 3,000 years back. But be that as it may, because we didn't do much advantage, we didn't take much advantage because we didn't allow our people to even learn. Only a sliver of probably 1% or 0.1% of the people learned it. They invented, but nothing else happened because our society was so hierarchical. It did not want anyone to get that knowledge. The foreigners came, took away, and so future, whenever you guys become engineers, ensure that the entire country becomes literate, has similar rights, and sort of connect with each other. So that's how the societies progress. They don't progress by sort of controlling knowledge to a sliver of people who may want to do it for their own personal selfish purposes. But the entire country, entire society works, then we might be better off as a country, and everyone benefits. But having said that, there is another. So numeral system had India connection. Then there was uh, a framework of double entry bookkeeping system. It was written by, it was again in Europe, they started double entry bookkeeping system. We were doing single entry bookkeeping system. Whenever you get time, you kindly look at it on single entry bookkeeping system, double entry bookkeeping system. But broadly speaking, over last 800 years, because Europe became very powerful, it started subjugating other countries. So their accounting system became very sort of prevalent in other countries, which they subjugated, including India. And that's where the double entry bookkeeping system, which was invented in Europe, it was written first time by an Italian priest called Luca Pacioli. So you guys can look it up as and when. But so numeral system had a good role to play. This accounting system had a good role to play in ensuring the larger businesses work. And then the formation of these companies. Companies are a very difficult thing to understand in an older world, because if you are two brothers and doing business, it's called partnership. But companies, thousands of people unknown to each other, unconnected with each other, putting money to run a business was never heard of. So this company started coming up. The Luca Pacioli book came somewhere in 11th or 12th century, and the new company started coming up for trading with foreign countries, largely India. So when Vasco da Gama came in 1498, or Christopher Columbus went in search of India and found West Indies. Why it is called Indies? Or the Americans are, original Americans are called Red Indians, because he thought he reached America. I mean, reached India and not America. That's why they are called Indians. But having said that, all the people wanted to come to India only. And why they came sea route only after 1400 or so on, 15th century, is because earlier there used to be land route from India to Afghanistan and further to Europe. But in around 13th, 14th century, the Constantinople, which is now known as Istanbul, was taken over by Arabs. And they started putting a lot of taxes. They started looting all the caravans. And that's why the European thought, if you have to trade with India, then you have to find a sea route. And if the world is round, one of them went west and wanted to come east, and one of them came west, like Vasco da Gama came to India somehow. And then to trade with India, many of those countries allowed companies to be set up. Multiple people, thousands of people could put in money. And also, whenever profits happened, they could share the profits. And that's how the shares started getting traded. And that's where basically the stock exchanges started coming up. People specializing in just trading of shares. And they created their own guild. Europe used to have a concept of guild, G-U-I-L-D. If you want to read up, there used to be Carpenters Guild, Engineers Guild, and all sorts of guilds, the medical practitioners guilds. And so that they created their own guild, which was called Stock Exchange. And it was given local monopoly that other people cannot trade in stock market without going through these brokers. And that's how the stock markets came up. The primary technology initially was to talk to each other and trade when it was not fast moving or not too many trades were happening during the day. But later on, they will basically put a handkerchief on two hands. When they shake the hands, they'll put a handkerchief that other people cannot see, and they would negotiate with their fingers. This negotiation with the fingers it's still prevalent in Myanmar. Jade, green. There is a green stone which is very costly. It comes, and that jade stone is still traded in Myanmar and Thailand using this handkerchief model. But later on, it started being traded through blackboard. People could see the prices and trade against that. And then even that became very difficult because thousands of people started coming in. And that's where they created a floor. So there was a large trading floor will be created, and each area of the floor will be given to a specific company or a specific name starting with say, A would be in different zone, name starting with B will be in different zone, C will be in different zone, and their specialist people will be sitting there or standing there to trade with you if you want to buy to them or sell with those companies. They will be able to give you two-way quotes. That is, if you want to buy, they will give you some price. If you want to sell, they will give you some price, and you could trade with them. And that's basically how this floor became the technology. And literally across the world, from Amsterdam to New York to Japan to India, everyone had the same framework of the floor. And so floor used to have floor brokers, people who were authorized. Everyone couldn't go there. And behind them was the main brokers who used to employ these floor brokers to trade on their behalf. And then brokers used to keep sub-brokers, and sub-brokers used to keep sub-brokers, and then they will connect to the customers across India or across the world, get their orders like this, and then the floor broker will go to the floor, trade with those guys, and come back and report. In the meantime, there were a lot of issues in terms of people cheating each other and things like that, and shares were in actually physical form. Printing was a very new technology, not easy to replicate. And so physical shares used to move after trading and all. So in my own life, I have traded with physical shares. I have also done programming, or at least I have seen programming with the punch cards. Many of you might not have even heard of punch cards, but earlier the computer systems used to have punch cards, which used to be the programs themselves. And we used to basically put that punch card in the machine, and then the calculations used to happen. And similarly, this floor business and the share certificates physically were there. And somewhere around late 80s and 90s, so India had 22 exchanges. We had exchange in Ahmedabad, in Calcutta, which are all, Bombay was of course the first exchange in India, 1875. It was set up under a banyan tree. If you are in Mumbai, or if you come to Mumbai anytime, you can come and see a place called Horniman Circle in area called Fort. And under banyan tree, the stockbrokers started trading. Why they were stockbrokers is because they used to trade in many stocks, including cotton, gold, bullion, everything. But they also used to trade in the stock of shares. They used to basically keep the stock of share certificate, and you could trade with them. And they started under a banyan tree, and they created their own association of persons, or a group of persons. Like I said, company. There are other methodologies like trusts, association persons, and all, or clubs to create a similar framework. But they have all little different characteristics, like cooperative societies and all. So this was like a cooperative society. Association of person was created for the stockbrokers, and that was known as the Native Share and Stockbroker Association. It was set up in 1875, 9th July, under a banyan tree. And slowly they started becoming rich. They used to make a lot of noise while talking to each other, trading each other. And the other people used to get frustrated about their noise. And they would call police. Police will keep on battening them. And then they would go around 100 meters away from there, 100 meters, 200 meters. And that's where they started trading in a place called Dalal Street, which is around 200 or 150 meters from the Horniman Circle's corner. And that's where they also bought their hall for trading initially. Then they created their own building. And now, of course, in late 60s and early 70s, in 1960, 1970, they created their own large building, which is what now we know as the BSE building, or a Firoz Jijibhoy Tower. But effectively, it was still a floor-based exchange. It lasted, the technology, from 1875 in India till 1990s. It continued that way. In the Europe, the first exchange was set up in 1607 in Amsterdam, which became later on European Stock Exchange, and then now it has closed down. But it's a history of around 400 years or plus 413 years now of stock markets, Indian stock markets own history in a formal way is also 145 years. Of course, the informal is probably 200 years old, but this is how they trade, clear, settle, and the buyer gets the certificate of the share or now in his name in the depository, and the seller gets his money. And that's broadly how the stock markets function. Once the shares come in your hand and it comes in registered in your name, then basically you start having share of the profit in the company. And that is what basically the stock market is all about. The procedure which I explained to you about trade, clearing, settlement, using the floor and now using the IT or screens or mobile phones is basically about just transferring the share from one person to another. But later on, whatever the profits the company makes, on that basis, the price of the company is to be determined. So if company's profits are going to go up because of certain reasons, then the prices will go up because it's going to make more profit. And so all of you who are owning the shares will start getting some share of that. And so that's why you want to pay more now. And if it's going to go down, then it will basically, the prices of the share also will go down. Now, in some ways, I've taken almost 35 minutes. In next 3, 4, 5 minutes, I'll tell you how the automation of stock markets happen, and also probably after that 2, 3 minutes on how during COVID, which how we have handled that, so that you get an idea of how India has managed its stock markets during COVID and also how it automated itself. So around early 90s, India wanted to give more importance to stock markets. Earlier, even now to some extent, most countries other than pure capitalist countries like America are what we call bank-driven countries. We give more importance to banks and less importance to stock markets or capital markets. And before 91, we were even more important. I mean, we were giving more importance to the banking system. The stock markets were basically almost like gambling dens those days. The society did not give them importance. But in 91, when we started liberalizing, government realized that we have so many people saving so much money. If we can collect them and give it to the right companies, then those companies will be able to utilize that money and also have a lot of jobs created and all. So government wanted to create good modern stock exchanges. And that's why they set up, after Harshad Mehta scam in 91, 92, they set up a committee called Firwani Committee, which recommended that we need to have a screen-based trading exchange where that should come up. And so government decided to go ahead with that proposal. They gave the mandate to IDBI. IDBI was in those days, currently it is a bank. In those days, it was not a bank. It used to be called a financial institution. It used to only lend long-term capital for project finance, large projects of roads and ports and factories and all. And minimum 7-10 years and not before that. So while the banks were supposed to give working capital, short-term loans. And so IDBI was told to set up this exchange on behalf of the government, or rather at the behest of government, not on behalf of, because it was a private sector entity from day one. But IDBI itself was a public sector entity. And I was working there after my graduation as an engineer and then from IIM Calcutta as an officer who was doing project finance. And 5 people were selected. I was one of them. I was just 1 year into the job. And they selected me because of my prowess with computer those days. I used to do a lot of spreadsheets and other things. And people thought I was very good in computers, which I was not. I was a mechanical engineer. But then India used to produce only 500 engineers in computer science those days. We used to have very few computers. And slowly that discipline was coming up. But I had some exposure to computers in my engineering, during my engineering projects also. And so in some ways I was the right choice, but in some ways it was what I call a quirk of fate. And I basically joined that team. I was only engineer and I was the youngest person in the team. And so I had to do everything which my seniors did not want to do or seniors couldn't do. And so I had to bring tea and coffee for them after IIT and IIM. So don't have ego problem when your seniors tell you to do something, please do that. And Like they told me to find a premises, do interior decoration. It's all the grunge work, but I had to do it, but I learned a lot. So whenever some opportunities come to you, please do that. Don't think that I am such and such engineer, so I will not do other mundane work or bad work or sort of chores. You have to do whatever comes your way. That is how life works, and that's how life happened to me. And then uh, we decided to go for trading through satellite telecom, because those days the telephone system used to be very difficult in India. Even a small telephone, normal telephone, analog telephone, now all phones are digital, but a landline analog phone used to take 5 years to come. And most of the time they were not working, because the linesman will ensure it doesn't work unless you give them bribes. And so those days, the largest dowry in many parts of India used to go to the linesman in BSNL, right? So those were the days. But we wanted to have a screen-based trading, and so an entire India on the same platform at the same time. And the only thing that could be done was through the satellites. We used to have a lot of satellites. Even those days, India used to send satellites like InSat 1, 2, 3. But we didn't use them for commercial purposes. So I was given the charge of setting up that satellite communication network also. I was also setting up the landline uh, communication network using lease lines and all. And we started with 64 kilobits per second. Today, you wouldn't even believe the 64 kbps. One line in 20 kilometers would cost 4 lakh rupees in those days, which would be like our today's 40 lakh rupees. And one line between Mumbai and Calcutta would cost you 40 lakh, which would be like today's 4 crore rupees per year. And so that's why we had to go for the satellite communication system. And in a way, I was in charge of it. I didn't know anything. There were not a single person in India to teach me how satellite communications worked, because nobody had done it except the ISRO scientists, and not for commercial purposes. And it was two-way, not like a television, which is one way. This was the broker had to send you the information, and you had to send back the information. And so we had to select the protocols, and a lot of things happened. But over 2 years period, I could set it up. And then India truly came together in one single location, that everyone was equidistant to the satellite. Around 36,000 kilometers is what the geostationary satellite stays. It's like a mirror. You send a signal, it mirrors back to the hub, and then hub sends it back, and then your terminal catches it. So that's as simple as that. Of course, some of you who are keen to learn satellite communications, you may learn how this entire frequency hopping and aloha and so on and so forth happens. But it was fun. I learned it by first principles by reading books. I still have those books in my personal library, which I learned which I used to learn the telecoms and all the different ways of doing things. So anytime a new business or new work comes to your way, which is not in your comfort zone, which is you have not studied before, you should do that. And then I was only Gujarati in the team, so I had to also set up the stock market, because stock markets in Bombay were controlled by Gujaratis those days, and even the notices used to come in Gujarati till 1994. And I studied in Gujarati medium till coming to IIT, so I had a lot of knowledge of Gujarati. So I ended up setting up equities market. Later on, I set up the derivatives. So if you have some understanding of how derivatives works, I set up the screen-based trading. That is, all the screens were designed by me, regulations were designed by me, the algorithms of matching were designed by me. In those days, it was fun. It was tough because we did not have the RAM and the UI and the programming languages you have. Basically, I studied Fortran and Basic in my engineering. But the programming which we did for trading system was even earlier, called PL1 language. And so in a way, we worked on what I call systems which are dinosaurs. I consider myself a dinosaur in this industry of IT. If I look at the IT part, in finance, of course, I keep on doing newer things. But I have been in 30 years. It was fun doing all these markets. I also started my own marketplace company called ActionNext.com for the B2B commerce in 2000. Of course, it was too early. It failed next year, and then I became the head of IT for Reliance Group and also cricket team Mumbai Indians and all. But that is my personal journey. The stock markets have taught me a lot. One of them is to, I don't myself invest, although I teach investments and other things, because I'm not allowed to invest myself in markets due to the position I am in. And during the Indian markets became basically in 94, 95, NSE started in 94, and in 95, BSE also became automated. 94, 95, there were no other markets in the world which were automated, screen based. America was floor based or phone based. Uh, Europe was floor based, Japan, China, everyone was, China probably did not have markets then, but Singapore, everyone was floor based. India started the screen based trading, and India has been pioneer in the stock markets automation. And I have been pretty much there on earlier on NSE side, now on BSE side. So both systems, both programming, all algorithms of trading, clearing, settlement, all literally have been devised by me or have been I have been involved, risk management and so on and so forth. So effectively, it has been fun. 30 years doing all sorts of new stuff in the markets, off the markets, including cricket and like manufacturing and oil and gas and schools and colleges. I've done a lot of sort of IT for a lot of businesses, including chemical, petrochemicals, and things like that. But whatever has come my way, I have tried to do it. And the stock markets literally have been able to increase the spread by literally manifold. Harshad Mehta days, 200 crore rupees used to be the trading volume per day. Today, on a good day, Indian stock market would do 40 lakh crore rupees of trading in a day of 6 hours, right? So you can imagine the kind of spread that is, the kind of instruments that have come in. And during COVID times, because we had already planned for the disaster recoveries and online real-time recoveries, online real-time replications, and work from home and other things. The day March 23rd it was announced, next day we were working in time. And since then we have not stopped. We never had a stoppage even for a moment, not for a second. If it stops, it becomes international news. And so in our business, no news is good news. We continue to work sort of 24/7, but almost 90% people work from home today for last, from March 23rd onwards. Only 10% come to office, and that also in that entire building, which is like 29 stories. And there is one more smaller building, which is what we call Rotunda, which has the trading floor, but there are many offices of the brokers. Hardly anyone comes. We have another office in another part of Bombay where some people go. We have another office in Hyderabad, which is our disaster recovery site. So there some people go. And so it's a very, very few number of people go to office every day. But it works like clockwork, and it works 24/7. There are markets in like Gandhinagar, Gift City. We have that international exchange. It works 22 hours a day, from morning 4 a.m. to next morning 2 a.m. It works continuously, and none of this market stopped. They trade today equities, equity derivatives, currency derivatives, interest rate derivatives, mutual funds, commodities derivatives, and many, many things, which when I started my journey, I did not even imagine that this would be possible. So these are basically the broad contours of the markets, the story of the market in India, and also the automation and extent of automation that happens in the stock markets. Today, our response time is what we sort of proclaim is 6 microseconds. We do much better than that. But in 1 second, there are a million microseconds. So we give you response at 150,000 of a second. And almost, you might think that why you require such a fast response. And the scale is 500,000 orders per second. So in 1 minute, I can take 3 crore orders at 6 microseconds. And in an hour, I can take 180 crore orders or 200 crore orders. And in 6 hours, I can take 1200 crore orders. So those kind of scales are not even seen in Twitter or Facebook or anything you see. But we have those technologies with the response time, which is like fraction of a second. And that's what basically the technology, the high tech, the cutting edge is there. But you might think, why do you require such fast response time? Is because the more than 90% orders now come using algorithms. There are no humans placing the orders. Humans only place the algorithms. They think and place the orders. Anytime a news comes, anything comes, algorithms eat them up and spew out the orders, and they come in like literally millions in a second. So I just want you to be aware that as engineers, you have a great role to play. Now we take question answer. If we have, I think we still have time left. But I just want you to be aware that engineers have changed the world in the past, and also stock markets. And I am one of the examples. But you guys might do even better because you are much better than me. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now we'll be taking up some questions from the audiences. So please leave your questions in the chat so we can pick it up. Okay, so one or two that did pop up before as well. Okay, here's an interesting one. How is artificial intelligence, that is AI, changing the face of stock markets?
See, AI is like air, it will be there everywhere. And so we use AI as the administrators of the stock markets. We use AI for figuring out the manipulators of stock prices, people who create artificial markets, the companies which don't give us information in time, but they give it to their friends and relatives, so to find insider trading and all. We use AI for last almost 6-7 years, but the stockbrokers and even the traders or investors use it for figuring out when to place order, what will happen to the stock price tomorrow or day after or even next 5 minutes, and their algorithms work differently from our algorithms. So each and every aspect of stock market today uses AI in a very significant way, and that is going to increase manifold. Algorithm more powerful. Some of eat up the text files. Tomorrow they might eat up even the video files. Today, when American president or American trade representative, when they speak about relationship with China or some deal getting reached, immediately millions of orders get pumped in by the algorithms, because those algorithms are watching now video using the AI. They are able to figure out when the market prices will go up or not, or a particular stock prices will go up or not, and or go down, and then they actually place those orders. So every part of life today also is covered by AI, especially in stock market. But tomorrow it might become even better.
Sure, sir. The future does look bright from a technological perspective. I'm getting a few questions about the new SEBI margin rules. So, what are your insights on the same and how it will affect trading for retailers?
See, it is good that some of you understand margin. At least you have a question on margins, because and good that many of you are reading up in the media what it means. So margin is a framework by which you ensure that the buyer, even if he runs away at the time of settlement, you have enough money from him so that you can actually buy from somebody else and give it to the seller, and so on and so forth. So basically, margin is a security deposit. When you go to buy a flat, you have to give some money. I'm giving you 1 lakh, so after 3 days I'll give you the full money. Or if you want to buy a bike, you have to give some whatever 5,000 rupees deposit, and then at the time of delivery they'll take 45,000 more. Similarly, the margin is that 5,000 rupees which you give as an upfront deposit, so that you don't run away. And if you run away, at least the exchange is not at loss. And what happens is this margins, the trading happens so fast. Every day in BSE, I get close to 45 crore orders in equities alone, right? So the trading happens so fast that there is a possibility that you may make more losses than you think you do. And so even the exchange thinks you will make. So exchange continues to ask for more and more margin, even during intraday, as we call it, during the day, at any moment, if your margins get used up. But the brokers, they earn not out of margins, they earn out of the customers trading. They generate brokerage out of the value of trading. So they want customers to trade more. And so they give them much larger limits to trade on. And so the SEBI has come out saying, don't give so much leeway to the customers. So for example, if exchange, you keep 100 rupees with the exchange, exchange gives you a limit of open position of say 1,000 rupees. But the broker may allow you to trade up to 1 crore rupees or 10 crore rupees. And when you lose money during the day, it is not that 100 rupees is gone. The remaining loss will have to be handled by the broker himself. But he's in his own greed. He's trying to basically make the customer trade more and more, take more and more positions. And that's where SEBI is saying, be careful, don't allow very large sort of trading open positions for the customers. And that's why it may initially reduce some volumes. But finally, what happens is the markets which are safer are the markets which are better for everyone. It's like in the car, when we were young, we were not ever wearing the seat belts. And when the seat belts came, people were like opposing it. They never wore that. And then slowly the government started putting fines, and still for many years people did not wear. And then the fine became more and more stringent. That's how people started wearing. And then the cars have become more safer now, even after accidents. Similarly, it happened to helmets also, right, in bikes. And similarly, this margin business is almost like helmets or a car seat belt, that it is actually for your own benefit, but you still hate it because it takes away some perceived flexibility or freedom you might have. So I don't think it is. In fact, last 25, 30 years, the regulators have increasingly made the markets regulations more stringent. In fact, 25 years back, the margins were very, very sketchy, very difficult, I mean, not almost non-existent. In certain areas they used to put, but otherwise nothing. And slowly the exchanges and the regulators started putting margins. Today, as I told you, from 200 crores a day, now you are trading 40 lakh crores a day, is largely because of the safety mechanisms that have been derived. And so the market participants will keep on making noises. Slowly you have to go towards more and more safety of the market. So I think regulators will continue on their paths. Little give and take, little to and fro will happen. But overall, if regulators think that it is not wise to have extremely thin margins or very, very, very low margins, where customers may end up making losses which the brokers have to handle, then the brokers themselves might default or use other customers' money to fulfill those obligations. And that's where the regulators may continue to make it more stringent over a period of time.
Thank you, sir, for your great insights. Another question would be, I mean, this goes on for a lot of sessions that we conduct as well, is the COVID scenario, which has taken, which has hit the economy pretty bad worldwide. So how has it affected the area of stock exchanges, and how has it affected the average buyer's mind as well?
So basically, two things happened. Initially, when this COVID shock came, it was not part of anyone's calculation. So the markets went down, and then slowly they realized that the dire predictions that were there in February and March about 10 or 20 crore Indians getting infected and a few crore Indians dying by July, August, nothing of that sort happened. Although situation is not that great, but it's not as bad as it was made out to be. And so slowly the market participants realized that it is a temporary shock. And so the market prices have started coming back. Markets went down by 40% initially, and now they've come up pretty much to the same level. In terms of the operations, the stock markets were among the rare businesses which continued operations as normal, literally without even a single minute change on a day-to-day basis. And that has been a credit to India's technological prowess, that all our brokers across the country, in all cities and towns, and mobile trading and all those, literally everyone is able to trade on Indian stock markets today. And that is basically telling you India's technological prowess. When India was complete lockdown for 70 days, and later on also sporadic lockdowns, India continued to work. And what has happened is, because other businesses were not working, other jobs were not happening, many people sitting at their home who had always planned to get into stock market themselves, earlier were working hard and couldn't do it. Now in the lockdown, they have started becoming investors or stockbrokers. So literally in last 3-4 months, we have added like a very large number of investors who have coming fresh, and not only in India, even internationally. A lot of retail investors have come into the market, and they've started trading more, which was a surprise to all of us. That we had assumed that the business will come down, but it has actually gone up slightly because of that reason.
Thank you, sir, for that answer. We have a lot of young minds in between us in the audience, people who want to become leaders later in their life. So, what do you think with respect to the stock market scenario is something where there is a room for a lot of improvement or innovation?
See, the way I look at it is every day, every moment is a room for improvement. There is nothing which is perfect, and the newer technologies, newer changes happening in society give you more opportunities every day. So there is nothing perfect. There is a huge room for when I joined markets in 92, 93, people used to tell me that market is perfect. There is no room for improvement. And you can see the sea change that has happened. And future will be even more changes will be there, and much faster changes will be there. So don't ever worry that any business, any area you want to participate in will ever not give you those opportunities for change. But the change may happen in expected areas and largely in unexpected areas. So you might think the older people who are there in the business may think the change on this area is desired, whereas actually the change may happen in another area. Like I told you, from floor we went to the screen. It was a complete change for people who were masters of floor. Their entire life had gone into screaming and shouting and writing and doing things. And those guys had become useless because they didn't know computers. Even just to enter data, they thought, why? I mean, they never thought from being billionaires, they'll become paupers in a short time, and they did. And so basically the change comes in many unexpected areas in addition to the expected areas. So my request is keep your eyes and ears open, get into details of each industry which you operate in or you want to go in. Don't become a driver of a car. That is what I call a lazy situation. You can actually manufacture your car right now, especially engineers. So why would you and of course, if you're a great driver, then please go ahead and do it. You can be a trader, a day trader, or whatever, microsecond trader. But if you can go into much detail, it's much more fulfilling individually, intellectually, but also it may give you more opportunity to change the business you want to operate in.
Thank you, sir, for that insightful answer. We'll have two more questions from this moment. So one question that I was getting was that slowly with the increase in automation as well as the activities of SEBI, the role of brokers is becoming a little bit diminished. And so, like, what are your opinions? Do you feel that in the future brokers will become pretty much obsolete? And also, what effect will it have on the stock market?
Only time will tell. See, I'll tell you, the functions need to be performed, okay? Who performs that function, only time will tell. As I told you, on the floor, there were floor brokers. They went out of business, right? So there is a possibility that other parts of the business also may have diminished roles or completely eliminated roles. That doesn't mean people don't want to trade. That doesn't mean people don't want to invest. They actually trade much more than before, literally 20,000 times more in 25 years, right? But they may do it in a different way, right? So the functions will continue to be performed. Who acts as an intermediary, who actually does it instead of even human investors? The computers are placing orders, right? And so algorithms will become different, and so on and so forth. So it will basically, it is difficult to predict when, what goes wrong, what goes right. And sometimes we may think that the brokers may not be required. Like 5 years back, many people thought that doctors may not be required because Google is now able to answer everything, right? And all of us think we have cancer and we have COVID, and anytime anything happens, all of us look at Google and all the symptoms match. And now when COVID has come, we realize how important doctors are, right? So it is possible that the broker's role may even increase instead of decrease, but only time will tell how the situation evolves.
Sure, sir. That was a great learning experience, I believe, for all of the audience. I will switch to the last question, then we'll be ending the session. Let's see if you have anything. Okay. Okay. There were a few questions before that were based around the topic of market manipulation. So obviously it affects the whole stock scenario in a negative fashion. So like, what are the steps that are being taken against market manipulation, and how is SEBI and other bodies reacting to it, and like how does it basically affect the scenario as well? Because
So
like
market,
I believe a lot of our viewers may be
so
willing to
market
know that.
manipulation
Sure.
happens in many ways. I mean, there are literally infinite ways to manipulate anything, you know. And so this is basically anything which creates artificial situation or puts large people in losses without any reason, then that becomes a kind of a subject of our sort of action in terms of we try to now ensure that those things don't happen at all in future by creating newer algorithms and newer ways of not taking orders. Before you place the orders, our algorithms check whether it's manipulative or not. Sometimes after it is allowed to enter, it is cancelled. Sometimes after it matches, we cancel it. And so there are many ways we do things. Similarly, for insider trading, which is also a type of manipulation, there are people who may create artificial demand. There are people who may create artificial supply or use derivatives in a spot market in a way that creates artificial prices. So, or give you a perception of liquidity where none may exist, or two people may, or few people may collude and trade a large quantity of a stock which doesn't trade even one share a day, but may trade a million or 10 million shares and then default on the exchange, and the other side ends up benefiting. So there are literally infinite ways, and I have seen some of that we have been able to completely bring down using modern technology, but then people have found newer technologies to create newer scams or newer manipulations. So we have to always be on our vigil to ensure that we identify those newer activities which are basically detrimental to the normal functioning of the market. If some of you are interested in how the fast traders sort of manipulate this, they can learn your algorithm and kill you in terms of putting algorithms which are basically going to make money out of your algorithms. It happened to Goldman Sachs a few years back, where they some algorithm players understood Goldman's algorithm and started putting wrong orders which would actually game that algorithm and make money out of that. And so there are spoofing algorithms, and there are unbelievably different ways of creating newer ways to make money by looking at things. There is a book called Flash Boys by Michael Lewis. If you want to read that up on how in America people hijack the order book before it becomes public, and they make money out of that, because in our business, if you are able to get even a 1 microsecond benefit in getting information early, then you may be able to place orders faster and all. And so there are literally newer, and the brains are so fertile of people across the world, not only Indians, that they continue all these things. And the people like us who are sitting behind trying to keep the market, the game safer and easier for everyone, we have to, many times we don't even know what they have done. Later on, when scandal erupts, we figure out, and then we take steps. At the same time, we can't take such difficult steps that the market themselves close down. Like somebody asked about the margin question, it is again relating to that. Some people are misusing the margin system. That's why the SEBI had to take this step. And so sometimes we know what is happening. We want to take steps, but we are not allowed to take those steps. Otherwise, the market itself may not function normally. So those balances we continue to maintain, but infinite number of algorithms and people's brains are working to make undue money out of this, and that is what keeps market also exciting. But we also continue to upgrade and update our systems and our thinking to ensure that the such manipulations don't happen again and again.
Great, so that was really engrossing. Do you have any final words for our audience before we take leave?
So I wish all participants, best of luck, and hope all the participants and their friends and their families and relatives will understand after the tournament how the markets function. Of course, it's in a way you create an artificial framework, but it still will give you a very important lesson for life. And if some of you want to make career, you please visit BSE. We also have BSE Institute, which runs stock market courses. You might try to also register with them. They also now in COVID period, they do it online also. And so there is something called BSE Varsity, through which you can do these courses online also. And so whoever is interested, please participate wholeheartedly, but also take that money is a serious business. It is not a game. It may look like a game. It may look like very easy thing to do, but it is really hard work, and never do anything wrong, illegal, immoral, so that you can't show your face to yourself in the mirror. So always try to do things which are fair, transparent, efficient, and try to make what I call honest money, and stay away from all the tips and all the manipulations that go on in the market. There might be people who do it. Don't get impressed by them, even if they become rich. That's not something one should try to do. So my request is all of you are welcome to the markets, understand nitty-gritties, and hope this knowledge which you gather, wisdom which you gather, will stand you in good stead over the rest of your lives.
Sure, sir. Thanks a lot for joining us, Ashish sir, as well as the people who joined us today as the audience. It was a really exciting session. I feel myself very privileged to be able to talk to Ashish sir. We'll now be taking leave. Thank you all for attending the session. Thank you, Ashish sir.
Thank you. Thank you.